Let's talk about three books that I read this year that made their way into the upper echelon of my favorite books of all time. I've had a great year of reading, but these three books really take the cake as far as making it into the list of my favorite books. Before I dive into these books, I'd love to hear what your favorite reads from this year are, and if any of them have made it into your favorite reads of all time. But without further ado, let's dive in. We should start with Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. Actually, the first book I read this year, and boy, was it a great start. I honestly liked this book, thought it was great, but did not imagine when I first read it that it would stick with me so hard through the rest of the year. But I go on to think about this book pretty much every day for the rest of the year. I really enjoy this story. I think it's a very special story, a very human story, one filled with really everything I think it means to live a good life, which is pretty much the premise of this story at the end of the day. On its surface, it seems to be a story about someone obsessed with death and how to have a good death. But through that journey, I think we learn, and the protagonist learns, what it means to have a meaningful and good life. Highly recommend checking out this book. It was definitely my favorite read of the year so far, and I'm glad that this is where I started my reading year. For that, we gotta go with the fifth season by Jemisin. What an incredible fantasy story this is. It really takes a lot of traditional fantasy and flips it on its head in a way that I found to be very fun, interesting, and unique. Now, this is a dark story. I would consider it a dark, grim fantasy. But what I love about it most is this very unique, mysterious, and costly magic system that's involved, and the way that the magic system really plays into the story. It almost feels like a character on its own. There's also this found family element in the story, and I love found family, but I love this one because everybody involved is so begrudgingly found in their new family, and I think that has a lot of meaning to kind of what the story is trying to say. Last but not least, we have The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. This is a silk punk fantasy story that involves a rebellion from many different perspectives tied together into this greater narrative. One of my favorite aspects of this story is the narrative perspective and the way the story is told. The story itself is amazing, but the way the story is told is what is really special to me. It kind of feels like a lot of different folklore, fairy tale type stories stitched together into one greater narrative. Each chapter almost feels insulated in its own way, but at the same time is very well connected to the next chapter and the previous chapter. I think it takes a real talent to be able to tell such a succinct story within a chapter and also create a connection to the greater narrative that has a wonderful payoff at the end. I think we follow some very realistic and relatable characters, and they go through such interesting character arc, and the relationship dynamics between the characters is just such a fascinating thing to explore. But what do you think? Have you read these books before? And if you have, let me know what you think in the comments. If you have any recommendations like these ones, please let me know, because if they're anything like this, I know I'm gonna love them. Would love to add them to my TBR list, would love to know what you're reading, and hope you have a great day.